Okay.
Good afternoon / morning, wherever you are. This is your monthly midday cafe brought to you by the good people of the Great Lakes region of the International Enneagram Association. We have expanded our chapter to include anyone who is anywhere near a lake. So if there is a lake within any vicinity, any mileage of where you are welcome. And also we can also be flexible about the definition of a lake too, if that helps us to be more inclusive. Okay. We are very excited for our Zoomcast today. We have some amazing folks on with us today. Claire's going to talk a little bit about our guests. Before we get into the amazing conversation that awaits us, I'd like to share a couple of announcements with you all to make sure that no one is left out of what we got going on. Okay. And so I'm going to share my screen. Don't judge my my inbox. I'm going to check all those emails, I promise. Okay. However, if you do not receive our monthly newsletter, I want to invite you to send us an email, and I'll put the email in the chat for you to connect with us so that we can add you to our list. However, there's a lot going on in this month of love. And next month, many of our board members are internationally accredited teachers and guides of the Enneagram. And so we don't want you to miss what the kids call the hot fire that is coming from our chapter. Okay. Speaking of which, Catherine Grant was leading an in-person workshop called Relax, Refresh, and Reanimate, which is a retreat and a workshop that sounds amazing. The Enneagram Institute of Ohio is offering multiple hybrid offerings. Reverend Clare Loughrige and the folks that support her and Scott over at Crossroads are leading. They've created a school of spiritual direction, and they're beginning a cohort that explores the Enneagram, the harmony triads, and the Trinitarian approach. I think I use my harmony training every day. So if you have not experienced this training, you're missing out on something that is integratable every day for transformation and illumination. Our own Rosemary Hurwitz is leading her monthly Enneagram group. Rosemary is such a spunky, energetic teacher, and she's going to be a hoot, and she's going to be a teacher at the same time. And then, of course, Catherine Grant again is leading Sell the Wine Dark Sea, an online workshop. There are some certifications that I've taken both of these, Dr. Jerry Wagner's training, Enneagram Spectrum, as well as the Motions of the Soul, Harmony Triad training. Both of these have, if you like science, if you really want to get like psychologically, scientifically sound Enneagram training, if you want to harmonize the mysterious accuracy of the Enneagram with behavioral science, Dr. Wagner's is a great training to take. And if you want to help people integrate their learnings and ahas and prepare grace and compassion for themselves and other folks, the Emotions of the Soul training is a great place to do that. And then, today we have our FATHOMS podcasters with us. I'm going to put all the links of all the trainings, including my own. I have 2 trainings coming up. That one is leveraging the Enneagram and being able to teach it anywhere to anybody. And the other one is approaching diversity, equity, and inclusion through the lens of empathy with the help of the Enneagram. And so I'll put both of those trainings in the chat as well. So Claire, would you introduce our podcasters, our guests today? And I'm going to pin all of our images so that everybody can see us talking, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Danielle. And then just to add to what you said, and both of your trainings are also accredited by the International Enneagram Association. and you just didn't turn them in time this month. So our the left-hand side of our newsletter didn't get the brilliant Danielle's trainings in there. So we'll have them next month. Also, Jerry connected with me yesterday and just said there's some more 2023, not just 2024. So that, again, check out enneagramspectrum.com and you'll be able to see all of Jerry's work in its entirety. So that is the big deal around here in the Great Lakes or anywhere touching a lake. And here we are on February the 15th, and I'm going to begin this time with just, one of those kinds of readings that might offer you a way to be with yourself and us more fully. C.S. Lewis wrote, "To love it all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully round hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love it all is to be vulnerable." So I'm just going to be vulnerable with you all for a minute. We in Michigan are grieving a mass shooting in at our university, Michigan State University. And as an Enneagram Style 3, when I'm in my false self, my trance, my unconsciousness, I would skip right past that and want to get on with things. But as I enter into my life and the life of others, I experience the layers of life and abundant life, which is both abundantly tragic and abundantly beautiful. And I don't think it's by happenstance. I have this feeling that we're going to be with some people that call themselves FATHOMS, an Enneagram podcast, because they've decided not to skim the top and to live on the surface, but they actually want to plumb the depths. These four folks in 2020 had a mutual interest, Abram and Creek and Drew, and they began to look for depth. They wanted to see inclusivity and nuance. They didn't want to skim the top. And so I have great respect then that they included our own Lindsay Marks from the Great Lakes region. And because if you've ever had a conversation with Lindsay, you're going to the depths, whether you want to or not. She'll take you there, right? And having experienced these four together for the first time over this last month, they wanted me to talk about the third act, aging, wrinkles. They wanted me to talk about mortality. And I said, okay, so this is not going to be an overpromised, under-delivered podcast that they do. They really do want the fathoms. They want to explore personhood and individuals and the way they experience life. And so the Fathoms podcaster, we're going to give you their links so that you can follow them after this, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're with us today. These folks are not going to do meme language with you. They're going to take you there. And so I want to welcome Lindsay Marks, Drew Mosier, Seth Abrams, Seth Creekmore, the Seth 1 and Seth 2 are known as Creek and Abram. And we want to welcome you here. We just say, will you share your own fathoms with the Enneagram and why your podcast matters in 2023? So we're going to let you, all four of you, unmute yourselves, and you can just get really messy. All right. Get really messy with it.
Woo!
Boy.
Love that invitation.
Great. So Lindsay goes first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just the last recording we did, I felt like we were saying do it messy for some reason. I can't remember now, but some hesitation there. And it was like, yeah, just do it messy. Let's do it. So we don't mind going deep, getting into the messy, beautiful stuff of life. But yeah, we're excited to be with you guys today. And we were talking about sort of an alternative way to use this word fathoms. And in my upbringing, I most commonly heard that word used to talk about imagination. And hearing people say things like, I can't even fathom that. And so I think that is what's really exciting to me about what we're trying to do as a team, is just to sort of imagine together and dream together about what the Enneagram community can be, how we can be present to each other, even though we're kind of coming from different schools of thought and different perspectives. Underneath all of that is, I think, a lot of shared goals and a lot of shared dreams. And so, yeah, we've just been doing a lot of dreaming and reimagining together.
Lindsay is, I just want to say, Lindsay has been, as you all know already, Lindsay has been such a vital contribution and voice to our podcast that we didn't realize we were missing. We knew there was something missing, but Lindsay has fit in so well. I just wanted to name that. But yeah, in the same sort of vein that you guys allow all lakes to be equally validated.
If you like drinking water, you're included.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I Lindsay proposed this idea of, like, in addition to the fathom terminology, dreaming about the future, like what that means for us as a podcast in our hearts, and I think again, all lakes being valid, I think for us that's us imagining, our version of that is imagining a future where the Enneagram doesn't moralize specific schools or teachers' perspectives as the only right one. Mm-hmm. We really, since the beginning, we've tried to include and honor the various perspectives and the takes on the Enneagram. This thing is not owned by any one person or place or thing, right? But yeah, especially Claire, I'm glad you were naming, like, this third act of life as well, which had me thinking about, in the rise, in the last 5 or more years or so of the Enneagram, it seems as though that this powerful tool was given to primarily first half of life people, which is great. This is if you're familiar with this terminology, the first and second half of life, it's where we're constructing this idealized self where we have to belong and prove our value in the world, right? So the first half of life people have popularized the Enneagram, which is great. But at FATHOMS, we're imagining an Enneagram that I think doesn't overpromise itself as a tool for transformation, because it's only being used in that first half of life interpersonal ego management experience. Mm-hmm. What we're trying to also do is use it as a developmental tool that looks at the first half of life, but also assists you and supports you in the second half as it moves you into who you imagine yourself to be is not actually all of who you are. There's more to you. Mm-hmm. So that's another incredibly valuable thing. And then we're going to get into this, our season theme, but also just imagining the fact that we probably need to revamp and probably need to update our take on the Enneagram, because it's not conducive for all identities. It really isn't. And we want to name that on purpose and recognize that the culturally centered identity is the one that, for some reason, up until this point in time, has said, this is what transformation is. This is how it works. And that is incredibly limited and narrow.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm preaching now because I got the mic like this. So I'm gonna pause there and let everybody else go.
Drew.
Yeah, I'd say just to follow up on that diversity of perspectives. I think, I mean, let's be honest, the last thing the world needed was 3 white guys with a podcast, and yet we started one, and then Lindsay has saved us from ourselves in so many ways. Thank you, Lindsay. But I think what is also true is that the last thing maybe the world needed was another just run-of-the-mill Enneagram podcast. And so we were trying, because there were plenty of good ones out there, right? And there are plenty of good introductory Enneagram conversations available there. And so we didn't want to try to retread or try to scrape and elbow our way into that space, because there's some major players who are doing some really good work there. At the same time, what we also noticed was back when the IEA had their conference in Oakland in person pre-COVID, Abram and I were there, and it was our first time kind of experiencing the weird and wonderful community that is the IEA. And it was a blast. We had a great time and still laugh about some of our experiences, don't we, Abram, in that conference. But it was really eye-opening as a few people who are kind of relative newcomers to that community. We felt that we were constantly trying to find out or figure out, okay, who we're interacting with, who we're meeting, which school they're a part of, and because then that tells you a lot about their approach to the Enneagram and what they care about with regards to the Enneagram. And what we were noticing in our own experiences and trainings in the Enneagram, as well as other relative newcomers, that people are approaching their Enneagram training somewhat differently now. They're picking from multiple schools, multiple lanes, multiple perspectives, multiple teachers to kind of cobble together and curate their own kind of Enneagram training and learning journey. And it made sense to us at the time that we could create a podcast that would also kind of represent that and speak to that, because there are some amazing insights and perspectives from this school, and there are some amazing insights and perspectives from this school and that school. And if all they do is exist in their own little echo chambers, then that doesn't benefit the broader kind of community, right?
Mhm.
And we're not teaching and sharpening one another from our schools. And so we made a conscious effort from the very beginning to let's bring in multiple voices that we respect, right? So it's not that anyone has access, to our audience, but let's bring in voices that we really respect, that have some good things to offer to the broader community, because that enriches all of us. And so we try to, as much as we can, have a learner spirit in our conversations, and not take that kind of expert chair, as host, which I think other podcasts do, and, for, good and plausible reasons. But we're trying to learn from the voices of those that kind of are kind enough to join us, in an episode.
As Lindsay is learning, I like to always sit on the other side of the table. Just makes it for a more interesting conversation. So while I absolutely affirm everything that everyone else has said, I also see us as our desire is to learn how to hold the tension of there's lots of different schools, there's lots of different thoughts, but how can we constantly bang the hammer and see what's left? What's the What's the thing that's going to be held up for the longest time? Has some rigor to it and some depth to it that is deeply true, and deeply revolutionary, and not just another podcast about, I don't know, how to be a better person in 6 hours, right? It's like, no, let's go over here and explore this concept, and then actually the flip side of that is this thing, and so let's bang those two things together and see what emerges. And I think doing that with people with people we respect, right? But doing it in a compassionate and curious way that isn't necessarily what's the word? Fundamentalist on some level, right? Where it's just like, once I find it, it's concretized and I will not change it. It's like, no, we're constantly evolving and we're constantly growing. We're constantly going to try to keep banging on things to get to that truest part of what we're searching for.
Whoa. All right. So there, we start with the gentle approach and we end with the banging. And it all belongs, right? All of that is really necessary energy in order to say what is most true. And which is why 9 styles and, 3 subtypes and family of origin differences and all of that really matter. And when you think about FATHOMS, and when I'm thinking about FATHOMS, and you're looking at the dynamics of personhood in this next season. And okay, so tell us from your Enneagram style, what is actually the soft approach or the banging that came up in you that you said, we've got to do this next?
I'm trying to remember how this came about.
Yeah. I think at least one of my contributions. So my consciousness is primarily filled with a lot of 9-ness, and that in at its best is inclusive of the whole, and especially recognizing my value as a part of the whole, right? And so I would say what we wanted to do, one of the approaches we wanted to do, and some of my contribution in that is looking at how the whole human experience needs to be allowed. As you said, everything belongs. And so we wanted to recognize how there are informing ways of what it means to show up as a full person that we need to recognize, because we're kind of missing some, or maybe we overdo one season and we don't really move into the next thing. So the banging and the soft, I think was, probably a mixture of all of us. But I think one of my primary contributions was just let's look at the whole experience. Let's look at all of the wholeness of this totality of what we might want to bring to the picture,
That's not nine like at all, Seth. Not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Drew, could you just give us a quick overview of the 3 dynamics of personhood, and then we can kind of talk about each of those within our style.
And let me be clear, we're not saying this is the definitive short list of dynamics to personhood. These are,
we figured it out.
I think this is an attempt to try to figure out, okay, how do we continue to kind of plunge the depths of who we are using the Enneagram, right? But not limited to, like you said, Claire, the memification or the listicles, or, some of those things that, are plentiful with a simple search, on your phone. And so what we want to do is, how could the Enneagram be a framework in which we could more deeply explore, the broader dynamics of our personhood beyond just, I'm a type 3. So therefore here's a list of traits about me as a type 3, right? At the same time, that type of language can be limiting. It also can be self-limiting, right? So as a 3, I have a hard time, a persistent challenge for me is to figure out, okay, how do I understand myself in a deep way beyond the things that I do right for others? And so we've come up with this kind of a 3-part framework for dynamics of personhood that kind of guide the season as a whole that we want to, lean into, but also individual episodes, right? And so the first kind of that first aspect or dynamic of personhood is individuality. So how does the Enneagram help us explore our individuality beyond just being confined to a stereotype of our Enneagram style, right? And then the second one is mutuality. So how do we understand ourselves in a deep and meaningful way in relation to in kind of an aspect of generativity with others? How do we use it to find integrate our individuality with the commonality that we can experience with others? And then the third aspect is unity. How does that process of coming to terms with our own individuality, exploring our mutuality with others, how does that help foster and cultivate a sense of unity that is actual unity and not uniformity, or defaulting to kind of the sameness of majority, but actually doing some kind of healing collective work together? So, and this is also where we have to cue up Abram to give his quote on unity, because that's what we do every time we talk about this. So go ahead, Abram.
Oh man. Unity is diversity maintained and protected by love.
There you go.
Bye.
So
All right, say that again so we can write it down.
Unity is diversity maintained and protected by love. This is not especially a Seth Abram quote. This is Richard Rohr.
yeah, so we're trying to lean into those 3 aspects of individuality, mutuality, and unity this season. So
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know Lindsay's going to speak to this, but I just want to highlight the word generativity that you used in mutuality. And that's the whole kit and caboodle right there. Because if everything that we're doing is not generative, it's not being shared, it's not being, lived collectively and beyond us. Well, anyway, that's enough for me.
Well, so for me, strategy of type 4, and individuality, I think this theme kind of emerged for me because of, how important it is to be a unique individual and to always create in better ways. I find distinction, in not so great ways. I find separateness. And so it's just a huge thing of mine, that whoever's in front of me, that I deeply humanize them in a way that is calling out their distinctness without separating them from myself. So I think especially in our culture today, right, identities are becoming weapons, when they're really just a box in which holds a lot of verbs, right? I'm a musician, right? That's not because I woke up one day and I was a musician. No, it's because of many hours of doing musician-like things. And so our identities can tell us stories about this person, but they can also be limiting if we don't allow that identity to be inclusive to the whole, to the uniqueness of the individual. And I think we have to start not only with blurring the lines of our own identities, celebrating them, absolutely, but also realizing how they flow back and forth and how they are they're not the whole, but they inform the whole. And then when we're able to do that deep work within ourselves, of that unique identity within ourselves, that we can then see the person in front of us and their unique identities and not feel threatened by them, but rather excited to be like, wow, what's around that next corner? I can't wait to understand more about this person and how they're different from me. So yeah, distinction and separateness kind of were things I've been thinking about for a really, really long time, especially in that 4 space. But I think for me, individuality is a big part of this season theme that I really resonate with.
I'll just,
So, yeah.
oh, yeah, let me just say back to Creek. It's the difference between a melting pot and a mosaic, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That even these individual pieces, if we step back, we see the whole, and they remain very individuated, differentiated, and yet are a part of this grander picture, rather than just blurring to bleed into and lose ourselves, right? So thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Linz.
So one of the words that keeps popping up for us in conversations with our guests and also amongst ourselves is the word margin. And so there's this way I feel like we are naming collectively who's on the margins and how can we pay attention to that, but also the marginalization that happens within ourselves. And so I feel like addressing those margins is a big part of dynamic personhood. And I love this season theme so much. I am obsessed with it. I think it's just it's been really wonderful to contemplate. And so, for example, thinking about who is on the margins, like some of the people that tend to be neglected in our society, for example, we could say like children and the elderly, right? So if we're not learning how to see childhood and that second half of life or third act of life with dignity and honor, then we're also not learning to see ourselves with honor as we move through these phases of life. So how are you going to use Enneagram work to talk about childhood wounds and do your transforming work? What's the point of that if it doesn't translate into dignifying the children around you? I lead with type 2, by the way. And if you're not, laying this foundation, this groundwork for understanding what's truest about you beneath all of your ego structures that we talk about all the time in the Enneagram, then how are you going to age and move through stages of your life, holding space for yourself and the things that are changing and shifting about you? And if you do figure out how to do that, and it doesn't translate into dignifying others going through the same process or those who are older than you, then it's really futile, in my opinion. So that's one thing I really love about the conversations we're having around season 4. Another thing is that word dynamics. I'm a music teacher and I literally use the word dynamics every single day in my job with little kids, because dynamics is a huge part of music. It's a huge part of what makes music interesting. If you don't have interesting dynamics in a piece of music, it is the most boring thing you've ever heard. And so I spend a lot of time with my students, reminding them to think about dynamics. Here's a crayon, find your dynamic symbols, and circling them in the music, and then reminding them about the techniques we use with our hands and our wrists and our elbows and our shoulders, and to create these dynamics. And so there's this beautiful metaphor there for me that I keep returning to about the tools that we use to make our lives more beautiful, or to highlight the beauty that's already there. I guess maybe a better way of saying that, embodying that and living that out. So yeah.
I just want to speak to just the beauty of the conversation around the margins, and oftentimes, so I laughed so hard when Drew said, like, the world does not need another like podcast full of white guys. Cause I'm like, Ira Glass just blew the lid off of so many people's minds when he like launched This American Life. Like, there's like the school of Ira Glass of podcasting, right? And everybody was like, I can do that too, and so I love that, because one of the things that I'm observing and learning as I teach diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility through the lens of Enneagram type and the accuracy of the Enneagram in helping people, excavate their own unconscious bias, right? Is that there is this invitation to wholeness that that empathy and compassion for each personality type extends, and that compassionate action leads to appreciation of like what's going on with everybody underneath of their skin. And then as a response to that invitation, a lot of folks start to erase margins, so that the folks who are, because people who are marginalized are typically a part of the global majority of excluded communities, right? And so we start to use different words, and we start to see people's contributions differently. And then we start to esteem people's contributions with authorship and compensation, right? That changes the trajectory of what it means to be a human being, right? And so I've seen folks completely restructure their organizations because the Enneagram has irritated their unconscious ways that they have organized everybody's contributions, right? And once they recognize the genius that they have missed because of how they have marginalized even their own staff, and the abundant productivity and generativity of what happens when we recognize each other's genius. I've seen folks from the quality of the bonds of their communities to the actual financial bottom line increase. I've seen all kinds of generativity happen once we allow ourselves to respond to that invitation. So I really like that part.
Yeah, so no pressure, Fathoms, that you're taking care of all of those things.
Well, and I think it's probably an important disclaimer to say we don't consider ourselves to be the only ones doing this, right? We just wanted to contribute to the deepening of the conversation. I also, it's also important for us to communicate, our theme for season 4, because if you didn't hear it, you otherwise might think that the season 4 is just the bonus season, because that's all we're doing is releasing bonus episodes as a stall tactic because what we're finding, we're releasing bonus episodes because we're trying to get as much of this dynamics of personhood content kind of banked and scheduled to do it well and to do it right. And it's taking time. So in the meantime, you're kind of stuck. If you listen, you're stuck with bonus episodes until we can get to a place where we're ready to actually get into the dynamics of personhood. So hopefully, co-host, it's okay that I said that.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's coming soon. It's coming soon.
So I want to ask, like, what would a person like me who has been to, I ran out of like memory. I've attended so many trainings and workshops and conferences and looked at this, vast audience and literally being the only person like me in the room. And I've had the experience of being the only person like me in the room. You know what I mean? So what would a person like me, what would you say is my ROE, like my return on energy? If I'm listening and investing my time, attention, and energy into your podcast, what's my ROE? Like, what's the return I get for my energy?
Wow, that needs a mic drop. Just that question. I think the thing that first jumps into my mind, Danielle, as like an Enneagram professional, like you've I don't know how long you've been in the Enneagram community, but you know lots of things about a lot of things, right? In the Enneagram community, and our hope is that that we can bring on people that you haven't heard of. That it's kind of wild to me. We've become really good friends with Awareness to Action, like Maria Socoria and Maria Jose Munita. And their approach is just so unique to the Enneagram. And it shakes some of that staleness off of it. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning it. Where type becomes a verb, everything becomes about action instead of just identities, which helps expand the definition of a bunch of different things. And I keep running into people that have never heard of them. And so I hope that like we are able to bring in voices that help expand your definition of a type, honestly, and how the instinctual biases work, and just new thoughts, new ways of articulating the Enneagram and the sense of self.
Yeah, I'd also add briefly that, in addition to, including voices in the Enneagram community of other Enneagram professionals that may or may have not been part of your training or anyone's trainings, I think we also are bringing in people who are not necessarily Enneagram professionals, but are experts in other areas and are well versed enough in the Enneagram to be able to start building some bridges and connecting the dots. Which, those are kind of my favorite conversations, to be honest, because it does it expands. I think the conversation beyond just, okay, what's another way to talk about type, or what's another way to slice up the Enneagram into these, different groupings, which are, those are still important conversations, but this is, going at it in a different way, which hopefully can help any Enneagram professional see that, okay, here's my kind of lane and area of expertise as it relates to the Enneagram, but there's all these other lanes that help inform kind of my own work and perspective, hopefully. Yeah.
I think
And
too,
Go ahead, Lindsay. I wanted to just raise my hand for when it's time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we could actually get a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, for sure.
In addition to the one that was just asked. But so Lindsay, finish that up, and then if you could raise your hand and let us know you have a question, we'd love to have you be a part.
Yeah, just Danielle, in response to your question, I think one of the things I've enjoyed about our conversations is that if you listen to the podcast, you may hear something that you agree with and you're like, oh, that lines up with the way I think about this. And then the very next episode might be like, I really don't agree with that. And so I hope that what we're communicating is that there's space for you in this community, building a community where there is room for disagreement, and there is room for us to hold space for each other while seeing things differently. So hopefully people keep returning for that feeling of like, well, if they can make space for people that they think differently than and still find beauty in value in something that they're bringing to the table, then maybe there's room at the table for me too. Maybe there's room for me to contribute what's stirring in me in regards to the Enneagram. So yeah, there's room.
That's nice to know. So am I unmuted here?
You are.
Okay, so hi, I'm Rosemary Hurwitz. I'm with Clare and Danielle on the board. It's nice to meet all of you. It's been so interesting, and I love me. I always kind of lately been feeling a little, old and left out of the younger generation's conversations on all of this. So it's really wonderful to be included as someone in her 60s who's been practicing this for 20 years. My focus has been more on the emotional wellness and mental health, also the spiritual connection, because of, the saying, I'm sure that you can relate, St. Augustine's saying, my heart is restless until it rests in thee. Well, I always believe emotional wellness and spiritual health go hand in hand because, we kind of are in the palm of God's hand, when we're emotionally well. That's what is wanted for us. And this is all informed by a clinical depression I had as a college freshman, which was acute and severe. I was in a hospital, felt like a leper when I came out, as people stare at you, you think they're staring at you because, you have a mental illness. And I'm just wondering how much, I know that's changed, and thank God it has, but we need to do more work. I feel I'm called to do more work. I don't tell you what your work is, but I wonder if you address these things, or you'd be interested in addressing it a little bit more. There's so many people that are so post pandemic anxious, so many feelings, so many different things that could be explored. And I wonder how that fits into your work, your podcast.
I think what comes to mind first for me is how we all are very excited and set upon the idea of we need to stop separating like good scientific psychological work of actual biological issues with Enneagram. And we have guests line up that are really, really brilliant psychologists. That one of my friends in particular, she's a clinical psychologist specializing in early childhood development and ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, and a bunch of brain science, neuroscience along with that. And we have a couple other guests that are kind of in that vein of just highly specialized, brilliant people. And that's the thing, is when we just start doing work with the Enneagram, it feels like it answers all the questions. But like we've all heard probably millions of times, it's just a map. And the real work happens when you actually dive in. Sometimes you don't need to know any more about your type. You need to go get therapy. Just stop.
Yes.
Your type is not the most important thing about you.
Well, and it's really important to be I think when you're doing the work with other people, certainly. I remember Carolyn Mace, I was at a workshop with her and talked about the wounded healer and how important it is to be way more healed than wounded. Just sometimes wonder, and this is maybe my own bias, just because there's so many memes and so many surface millennials that seem to be in the surface, on it all. And it's okay. It's a place to start. I don't judge them, but it's, I'm just saying there's it's rich. I agree with you. And I hope that we can work on the, all of us, or in our own way, the mental health aspect, because talk about the marginalized, and the people who are, anyway. You get my drift.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'll quickly chime in as fast as I can to just say, it sounds like you have a bit of a faith background, which is awesome. I think we all do as well. I grew up with a lot of spiritual bypassing. So all you do is pray harder. And that's how you work out all your stuff, right? And one of the values of the Enneagram names that we also do on FATHOMS is that we have a head, we have a heart, and we have a body. And you can't, I really do believe, it sounds like you do as well, that you can't be spiritually mature while being emotionally immature.
Yes.
And to work on yourself spiritually is to work on your heart, is to work on your somatic awareness. These things are so deeply interwoven and informed. And it's so easy to mistake real growth and transformation on the surface without doing all this other real work. So yes, we do include the totality of the human experience as best as we can. This is kind of the idea for the whole dynamics, as many as we can include in the personhood of experience. So
Great. It sounds multi-layered and wonderful. Great to know you.
I love that. Thank you, Rosemary. I also want to just acknowledge in the chat that Karen said, I love your theme for this year. Curious if you've had Dr. Deborah Threadgill Egerton, we call her Dr. E, and on as a guest. She calls herself an Enneagram activist in the DEIB space. In her book, No Justice, No Peace, she uses the roadmap in the work of justice and equity. And Drew responded and said, Karen, yes, she's on our calendar. And just like the end of the Marvel movie where you stay after the, I also want to throw a little spoiler alert that I'm going to be on the Fathoms podcast as well. So
I was going to say it if no one else did.
I want you to know that I'm going to act up. I'm going to be just
yes,
completely a badass on this podcast. I'm going to say whatever I want. I'm going to get canceled. I'm going to get resurrected. All of that.
Let's get into trouble, Danielle. Let's do it.
Now I'm excited.
yeah,
I'm gonna pull my 1 out. I'm gonna pull my 7 out. I'm gonna pull my 4 out. I'm gonna get mad. It's gonna just be everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The feelings and the fun.
Well, any closing, just kind of in a bullet form, Lindsay, Drew, Seth, Abram, Creek, in a bullet form, what would you like to leave us with?
I'll leave with this. I tend to be the guy that brings quotes the most to the podcast, and so I'll share a quote as a way to tie how I see the three dynamics that we've chosen of personhood, how they are deeply informed and lead to one another. Alan Watts says that there is a price to be paid for every increase in consciousness. And I'm seeing this as individuality to mutuality to unity. So there's a price to be paid for every increase in consciousness. We cannot be more sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain.
Thanks, Seth.
I'm still thinking, so somebody else go.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add other than, if you listen and have thoughts or ideas, please pass them along to us. We are open. We are open and willing to receive them. So thanks for allowing us to talk to you about this work that we do, that we care about so much. So and appreciate the good work that you all are doing in the Great Lakes region, which is not really a region anymore, but a brand. So thank you.
It's not a region, it's a brand. Clare, that's a t-shirt. It's not a region, it's a brand. Thank you so much for that. And thank y'all for joining us. We are so excited to be with y'all. Hey, everybody who's still on the call. First of all, I want y'all to know that no one has dropped off the call. Everybody has been captivated by this conversation. And so for those of you who want to gain more insight and knowledge, all the links to check out the FATHOMS podcast are here, as well as all the links to join these IEA accredited teachers and board members in their workshops. We also want you to know that if you want to nudge a friend of yours and their journey of discovering themselves through the wisdom and accuracy of the Enneagram, we also have a YouTube channel that we put our past episodes on. And so you can, at your own pace, explore the thought leadership and genius of past guests, as well as follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook page, and join our newsletter via giving us a quick shout out via email. We are so grateful for your presence, your time, your energy, and excited about how we are changing the world one questionable lake at a time. So
Questionable. Like,
with that,
One
That's a
body of
t-shirt.
water at a
well,
time.
thank y'all so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, guys.
Thank you.
thank you so much, everybody. Hi, Mom. I love
Hi,
you.
Hi, Stacy.
Anybody know what this is when you do this?
Is
No?
that podcast code too?
No, that is. Oh,
Mom.
that
is
is
it?
what. That is what. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. Comedian. She had a show, and every at the every, huh?
Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett would tug on her
Oh,
to say goodnight to her. Was it her mom, Becky, or her grandmother?
Oh.
Grandma.
She would always do this to
was her
say
grandma.
goodnight to her grandma.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
it.
Carol
Mm.
Burnett. Yep, I would always watch the show and wait for her to tug her ear to say goodnight to her grandma. So
Aw,
good night,
that's great.
grandma.
night.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
I'll talk to
Bye.
y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.